Welcome to Policing TV, and I'm delighted today to welcome former New South Wales Deputy Commissioner Mick Willing, current CEO of Fortem. More on Fortem for those unfamiliar with Fortem if you're not in Australia, New Zealand, and a number of other things. The Chief Exec of the Pelion Group will talk about that as well, former director at Accenture. So there's lots for us to talk about, Mick, here. In this first of what I'm hoping will be three videos, we're going to look at your police career with New South Wales Police.
Mm.
And I'd just like to start. I almost always ask, what interested you in a career in policing? What led you to join New South Wales Police back, I think, in 1990 or thereabouts? And so how did that process of deciding that you were going to join the police come about?
Well, Bernard, it's lovely to be with you in Policing TV. Look, interesting question, and I think you can blame 1980s policing crime shows probably. So when I left school, I kind of had two things in mind. One of them being to be an archaeologist, and the other one was to be a detective. I ended up going to university for a short period of time and then ultimately decided to leave after a few months and join the New South Wales Police Force to pursue my, I guess, goal of being a detective. And that was something that I was very lucky to do throughout the course of my career. I spent most of it in plain clothes and had the privilege of working in some amazing areas in criminal investigation as well. So very lucky that way, mate. So you could probably blame the Miami Vice episodes I looked at when I was in my formative years at school.
So you joined the New South Wales Police back in 1990. Was it when you joined? Was it what you expected it to be?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I remember distinctly. I spent 6 months at the Goulburn Police Academy in New South Wales. I was stationed at in the inner west of Sydney, at Annandale, Leichhardt, around that sort of area. Yeah, it was. It was certainly an eye opener for a person who just turned 19 years of age on the streets of Sydney. But the camaraderie, the sense of feeling, and the sense of looking after each other was really really strong. The other thing was, at the time, you didn't want to go home or miss a day's work because it was fun. You'd always see and do something incredible. And so that was something that I deeply I miss about policing, but it was certainly what I expected insofar as the organisation. But, you never knew what you were going to see day in and day out. So, it was a great learning experience for a young guy like me from the country.
So you mentioned there the sense of camaraderie, the enjoyment that there was. We'll come on in a moment to the point at which you were promoted to be a superintendent, area commander, some 17 years or so into your police
Mm.
service. But let's just focus on those early days for the moment. The camaraderie, the team spirit, are key in your recollections there. What other recollections do you have of that time, good and bad? And
Mm.
what I'm trying to establish here is what for somebody who's thinking of joining the police, whether it be in Australia, maybe whether New South Wales, Western Australia, Vicpol, and so on, but also worldwide. What is it about policing that in those early years that a relatively new recruit will come potentially to love? And what are the challenges?
I think the variety of work, the variety of things that you see and do day in and day out, is something which is unique to policing. Policing's it's a calling for lots of people. For me, as I said, I had the desire to be a detective, so I focused really hard on trying to, I guess, impress and show the fact that I had the capability of going into plain clothes, and I was able to do that relatively quickly. And so the opportunities were there if you pursued them, and if you, I guess, worked that bit harder, spent that little bit extra time doing your job as best you possibly can in a professional way. And for me, most certainly the doors opened by doing that. But it was the variety of work. And the things that you saw and did were just, you would literally at the end of a shift just go, wow, I can't believe that. So, and also that sense of service too. You throw on that uniform and or in plain clothes, the suit, and you're doing something which is remarkable, and you're serving the community and giving back. And I guess, true public servants are driven by purpose. And, pretty quickly, going into a policing career, you know, purpose is at the forefront of what you do every day. And so it's meaningful and it helps people. So for me, that was what was the attractive side about it.
And that seems to be a common thread worldwide, this sense of purpose, some sense
Mm.
contributing to public good and the like. You moved or you were promoted through the ranks through to superintendent for a
Mm.
local area command in October 2007. And then roughly 3 years later, you became a detective superintendent. So what I'm reading into this is that you did indeed become a detective. You then
Mm.
moved back to the uniformed ranks prior to going back into the detective role. Your
Yeah.
recollections about that time?
Yeah, so I had the privilege of working at the then Homicide and Serial Violent Crime Agency, New South Wales Crime Commission. But I went. I'm a Dubbo boy, born and bred Western New South Wales in Australia, and I had a desire to experience what it was like working at home. And I ended up going out to Dubbo and was promoted to the rank of detective sergeant. So I was a detective, but I had responsibility for 21 investigators at the time. And then, a couple of years later, I was promoted to detective inspector. So it was a uniform position, but you carried the designation of detective as well because you were responsible for managing crime in a geographical area. And so, I maintained my, I guess, detective role throughout the course of my career until I was promoted to superintendent. Now, a local area commander, as it was then, has responsibility for a geographic area, delivering all policing services. So, um, at the time, you dropped the title of detective. You already had it. You was always going to be and would always remain a detective. But in that particular role, because it was position based, you called yourself a superintendent, and that was
Okay, so
uniform based. So, I spent time, in regional New South Wales as a superintendent leading commands. Then went a little bit of time as a chief of staff to one of our deputy commissioners in New South Wales before taking on what I think is one of the best roles in policing, and that was, as the commander of the New South Wales Police Force Homicide Squad. So that being a criminal investigation in brackets, inverted commas, I should say, position, your title was detective superintendent. So,
so some 100 investigators, intelligence
yep.
officers, support staff, high-profile homicide, suspicious death, death
Yep.
in police operations investigations. So, absolutely at the heart of the New South Wales police investigation of homicides. There must have been some challenging times there. Thinking
Mm.
of those in leadership roles, not just Australia but more widely. Anything from that particular time that you remember as a particular challenge, and how you and colleagues got through that challenge?
Yeah, a couple of different things, to be honest, Bernard. So, when I came into that role, whilst I'd been a detective throughout the course of my career, I didn't come up through I guess, the squads or the major criminal, specialist major investigation side of things, and so I was a bit of an outsider coming in. And as you'd expect, a squad like the Homicide Squad has got very strong culture, highly specialised investigators doing, the peak of investigations. And some of these people had been homicide investigators literally when I joined the police force. So here I was, I was 39 years of age, going into the homicide squad as a commander. It taught me a lot about leadership insofar as recognizing the skills and capability around you. And my role I took on, and I was trying to be as consistent as I could, was to almost get out of their way and let them do what they do best. But take care of the politics and take care of I guess the resourcing and strategic direction of the squad. that was a unique challenge in lots of ways, but it was a wonderful challenge and experience to have. At the time, the homicide squad, had carriage and still does, but has carriage of death in police operations investigations. So we call them, critical incidents in New South Wales. So, police shootings, those type things, use of force deaths. That was a big challenge because there was a lot of commentary during my time as the boss of Homicide from various stakeholders, including oversight bodies who felt very strongly that police should not be investigating police. And so, dealing with the politics around that, the coronial jurisdiction and those oversight bodies who had strong views, and then, pushing back on that to say, well, there's nobody around with the right capabilities to be able to investigate those matters. And in fact, the homicide squad had a sense of pride in the fact that it conducted those investigations with transparency, the utmost integrity, and straight down the line. Was something that I used to push back on some of those stakeholders and deal with the politics around it. But it was a really challenging time. The investigations themselves, I remember one year we had, I think, 8 level 1 critical incidents. So police shootings, the murder of 2 police officers, those type things. When you see the troops from a squad like Homicide pick those jobs up and investigate them and do such a wonderful job, it's a challenge from a leadership perspective, but it's also very inspiring to see the professionalism of people that work in areas like Homicide doing what they're doing as well. So challenging, a lot of media pressure, a lot of political pressure, but it was it was a great experience. I was there for around 6 years.
So you're talking there about leadership, and your leadership responsibilities, of course, continued as you moved further up through the ranks. We've only got a limited time left on this first video, but I do want to acknowledge that you were appointed by the Premier of New South Wales as the State Recovery Coordinator for the 2019-2020 bushfire disaster before moving on to become Assistant Commissioner and subsequently Deputy Commissioner in New South Wales Police.
Yeah.
Those times in those leadership roles, was it quite different leading in those ranks from the leadership roles that you played in some of the earlier ranks that you filled, or was the leadership that you role that you had to fill as deputy commissioner similar in many ways to earlier leadership roles you'd filled?
So, look, I think it was different insofar as the higher you go, the more strategic you need to be. The bigger picture, comes more and more into play, and the way that you approach the bigger picture changes. And it's also driven by the circumstances, at the time and the particular roles that you take on. So, as an assistant commissioner, I had counter-terrorism and special tactics command, which I basically inherited on the back of the findings of the Lint Cafe inquest into the siege that saw the death of hostages and those sorts of things. The counter-terrorism command was at the pointy end of that, and sort of picking that up and sort of pulling that together as best I could, pulling a leadership team together, and driving it forward with a strategic direction was something that I focused on. I had Central Metropolitan Command, where you get the big events like New Year's Eve and those sort of things as well. Protests, all of those sort of challenges. It took a different style of leadership because the circumstances were different. And, I'm a big believer in adaptable leadership. So, you can't take the same style that you had in one situation and apply it to the next situation because it's different. And so the need to adapt your leadership style to the circumstances was pretty prominent and pretty evident for me. And then becoming a deputy commissioner, with responsibility for, almost 6,000 staff was again, another challenge, and took a different style as well, because, you're setting a strategic direction, from a more of a helicopter aerial view, looking down and then driving and enforcing, or I guess empowering those below you to implement that strategic direction. So again, different. So different challenges depending on the circumstances and the roles that you take on.
Let's come on to some more of those leadership challenges in a moment or two. But we've got to the point where, as we leave this first video, you are Deputy Commissioner of New South Wales Police. We'll come on in video two to matters that relate to your move away from New South Wales Police and to the present day. And then in
Yep.
video three, we'll look at future matters. But um, Michael Mick Willing, for the time being, thank you so much for joining us on Policing TV. As I speak, we have 999 subscribers to the Policing TV channel. By the time that this is published, I do hope and expect that we will tipped over the four-figure mark. But if you're
Yeah.
watching this video and you haven't yet subscribed, dear viewer, please subscribe on YouTube to Policing TV. But Mick, we'll pick up again in a moment or two on video number two. For the time being, though, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bern.